Okay, get this. What if I told you there's a country where the law literally forces corporations to spend billions of dollars every single year on social good? I know, it sounds kind of wild, but it's not a hypothetical. It's happening right now, in India. So let's dive in and explore one of the boldest social experiments in corporate history. First, just let this number sink in for a second. 1.2 lakh crores. Now, for those of us not used to Indian numbering, let's put that in perspective. That's the projected annual spend on corporate social responsibility in India by 2035. In US dollars, we're talking over $15 billion. And this isn't a one-time thing. That's per year. It's one of the largest, most consistent pools of private money for social impact anywhere on the planet. So, you're probably asking, how on earth did this happen? Well, it all goes back to 2014, when India did something pretty radical, something no other country had done on this scale. It turned CSR, corporate social responsibility, from a nice-to-have, voluntary thing into a straight-up legal obligation. Let's break down exactly how this role works. Okay, so who has to follow this law? It's not just the megacorporations. The law sets up 3 simple triggers, and a company only has to hit one of them. A net worth of about $60 million, turnover of around $120 million, or, and this is the real kicker, a net profit of just $600,000. That last one is huge because it ropes in thousands of successful medium-sized businesses, not just the giants. So what's the actual requirement? If a company hits one of those triggers, it must spend at least 2% of its average net profit. And the way they calculate that is actually really smart. It's based on the average of the last 3 years. This smooths out the bumps. So one really good year or one bad year doesn't throw the whole system off. It creates a much more stable and predictable flow of funding. All right, so they have to spend the money. But on what? Well, the government doesn't just let them do whatever they want. There's a framework called Schedule 3 that lists out 13 approved areas. It's a really broad menu, covering everything from fighting poverty and promoting education to environmental projects and even protecting national art and culture. Companies get to choose, but they have to stay within these lanes. And just in case you're thinking this is all some sort of gentle suggestion, it is not. This law has serious teeth. If a company doesn't comply, it faces some hefty fines. And here's the key part. It's not just the company that gets penalized. The individual officers in charge are on the hook too. The message from the government is crystal clear. This is not optional. So, we've established this massive, legally mandated river of capital flowing into social development. Sounds amazing, right? But here's where the story gets a little more complicated. The big question is, where is all that money actually going? Because, as it turns out, just having a ton of money in the system doesn't automatically mean it gets distributed fairly. The first layer of this is corporate concentration. There are tens of thousands of companies subject to this law, but a tiny sliver of them, just the top 200, are responsible for over half of all the spending. The remaining thousands and thousands of companies make up the other half. So right from the start, the flow of money is dominated by a handful of corporate giants. And that concentration doesn't stop with the companies. It gets even more stark when you look at a map. Over half of all that CSR money flows to just 8 states. And which states do you think they are? Yep, you guessed it. Mostly the ones that are already more industrialized and economically developed. And this, right here, is the central tension of this entire law. The money tends to follow corporate footprints. Companies invest where their factories and headquarters are. This means that regions with lower incomes, higher poverty, and less corporate infrastructure often get left behind. There's a real danger that without some course correction, CSR could end up reinforcing the very inequalities it was designed to fix. Okay, let's zoom in now from that 30,000-foot view down to the ground. We have to talk about the most important relationship in this whole ecosystem. And that's the one between the companies providing the money and the nonprofit organizations, the NPOs, who are actually out there implementing the projects. And this relationship isn't just important, it's deeply interdependent. I mean, just look at this data. For half Of all the small NPOs surveyed, CSR funding isn't just a part of their budget, it makes up more than 50% of their total funding. It's an absolute lifeline. But as you can imagine, that kind of dependence creates a pretty significant power imbalance. You can really see that imbalance right here, in what's called the partner scorecard. When NPOs rate their different funders, CSR consistently scores the lowest on the things that really matter for a healthy partnership. Things like being flexible, being willing to fund for the long term, and helping them find other supporters. The feedback from the ground is that it often feels less like a partnership and more like a transaction. And this quote from a nonprofit leader just nails it. It really gets to the heart of the issue. The call is for a fundamental mindset shift, to move beyond just checking a box and accounting for a 2% spend, and to start truly embracing social accountability as a core part of what it means to do business in India. But it's not all about friction and challenges. A really crucial evolution is happening, especially among those leading companies. They're starting to see CSR not just as a legal burden they have to deal with, but as a genuine strategic opportunity. This is where it gets super interesting. When you ask CSR leaders why they do this, beyond just the law told me to, their answers are all about business value. An incredible 87% say it's for employee engagement. People want to work for companies that make a positive impact. Almost 3/4 say it improves how communities see their brand. This isn't just charity, it's a strategic play. So, the big takeaway here is that CSR is graduating. It's moving out of the margins and into the boardroom. It's shifting from being a simple compliance checkbox to becoming a core part of corporate strategy, brand identity, and even how companies attract and retain top talent. So, we're a decade into this grand experiment. The question is, where does it all go from here? Let's take a look at the path forward, covering both some of the immediate rule changes and the bigger vision for the future of this sector. First, let's talk about the plumbing, the nitty-gritty stuff. For 2025, the government is making moves to cut down on some of the red tape. They're rolling out a new online system to make it easier for NPOs to register, and they're giving companies more flexibility and time to file their reports. It's a clear signal that they're trying to make the whole process a bit smoother for everyone. And what do the leaders in this field want to see next? Well, this slide pretty much lays out their wish list for the government. Over half are asking for clearer rules to cut down on confusion. And a huge number, 2/3, want a formal platform where they can share what's working, learn from each other, and find new partners. It's really a call for a clearer and more collaborative ecosystem. Which brings us right back to our final massive question. We've talked about laws and percentages and penalties this whole time, but the real potential here is so much bigger than that. If they get this right, if they can steer this massive river of capital effectively, could this law actually help define India's next chapter of development? One that's more inclusive, more scalable, and truly rooted in local needs? It's a huge question, and believe me, the whole world is watching to see the answer.